you are biased when it comes to your own company. This is why you hire an external person to do it. You cannot objectively do this communications for yourself. You need someone else to do it.
Today's guest is Joshua Altman. He's the managing director of Beltway Media, a DC-based communications consultancy that helps founders and organizations clarify their message and build trust through strategic storytelling, which I'm excited about because we've been on this topic recently. With a background in journalism and years of experience advising leaders across sectors, Joshua brings a sharp perspective on why communication is a core skill for entrepreneurs, not just a marketing function. So Joshua, welcome to the Necessary Entrepreneur, man.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So why is communication, why is it a core skill? I know we're an entrepreneurship podcast. We're really reaching business owners and people that are at the beginning of their journey. Why is communication a core skill?
I'd say it's a core function for your business rather than a core skill for you to have, which is something we talk about a lot. We say we are the experts at communicating your expertise. You're a developer, you're in robotics, you're a professional services firm, you're a home service, whatever it is you are. That's your expertise. We don't try and do that. Our expertise is communicating that. You don't need to be the expert in that. But it is a core function for your business because that's how people know about you. Not just about you, but what you do, and most importantly, who you are. Without communications, you're just an entity, and they get to fill in the blanks.
Are we talking PR? Is that what we're talking?
PR is one aspect of it, and PR is an interesting term, public relations, because there are a lot of different definitions of it. I kind of like the one from the PRSA, Public Relations Society of America, and it's roughly, I'm going to paraphrase it here, any communication that talks to publics being the word for stakeholders, which is very broad. It's media relations, it's investor communications, it's internal communications, it's pitch decks, it's everything would really fall under that broad definition of PR. A lot of people think of it as media relations, which is important, but that's really just one aspect of it.
Does your brain, we're talking about communication, does your brain more go to what people consistently get wrong, or does it go to, hey, here's what we should be doing?
Depends on what you are and what your stage is. So if people have one perception of you, if that's wrong, maybe there's a reason they have that and you can lean into it. It's not necessarily not what you do. If, you're a B2B SaaS and people think of you that way, but you're really targeting small businesses, but they think of you as medium, or you're targeting medium, but you're really doing well with small, that's not a huge leap. And you can work with that. You can lean into that one way or the other. If it's a blank slate, that's very different. Then you really have to start building, and that takes a lot of time. So when you're talking with these, really early stage companies, or even a little later than that, we started with this, idea that communications is a core function. It does get left to the end. We're launching. We need to tell people we're launching. And then we need to bring in someone or do it ourselves. All we have is that website we set up at the beginning. Bring it in early as part of your early conversations at your leadership level. Then you'll have a much better groundwork, because then you're not trying to change that perception. If people are thinking for you as small businesses and you're really targeting medium, you're already there and you've been laying that groundwork in a lot of different ways. And that could be thought leadership. It could be going on podcasts. It could be giving speeches. A lot of it's still in person and going to, community business groups and trade shows. And that gets left out a lot, but that's where a lot of people are. And you get to talk.
If we're supposed to do this early, if that's your argument and what you figured out through your journey, then what happens when we realize that we need to change?
Pivoting's easy. I've done it. My business didn't start out exactly what it is now. If you're doing something right, you're going to pivot over time. That's growth. That is good. If you have to change, do it. Do it smart.
Do you communicate that change?
Always. And if you have to do it overnight, you probably are in a crisis and you hope you've had this planned out. So one thing we do with people is crisis communications, and it's, like a fire drill. You do it, you practice it, you hope you never have to use it.
I bet you
but
learned
it's
that.
there.
Yeah, I mean, you learned that on a high level being around politics, right?
Yes.
Right. And what do we make now, maybe in business outside of, where you originally started your career in journalism with The Hill and behind the camera and production? What do we make of this news cycle now? We used to always hear it was a 24-hour news cycle. If you go back in history with CNN and the Gulf War, it seems like it kind of started there. I don't know if it was before that, but in
it started
business,
much earlier than that.
Maybe we saw it as the public as that was the first. Maybe we interacted with it differently that way. I don't know.
We did.
It felt like it was
We
at
did.
our fingertips then. And so what do we make of that now? I don't know what the term is now, if it's still a 24-hour news. It feels like a 20-minute news cycle to me now.
Constant news cycle. I've heard news flood, news tsunami, deluge. It's all there. It really is constant. And I hear this a lot from people in news still, or who work around news and PR, that breaking through that is very challenging because there's always something. At the same time, because there are more outlets, there are more distribution channels, it can be easier. I hear all the time from clients, we want to be on the front page of the New York Times. No, you don't. Very rarely is something good on the front page of the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post. That's, wins election, wins Super Bowl, lands on moon is pretty much the good news there. It's usually, if it bleeds, it leads. You don't want to be on that front page. Usually.
So do you still...
inside page is good.
Do you want to be in the New York Times?
Yeah. You want to be on an inside page. That's where some good stuff is. But if you're on the front page, odds are, if it bleeds, it leads. But there are a lot of other outlets. There are regional publications. There are trade publications. There are online entities that you can go to. Podcasts are great to reach very specific audiences. You could get better bang for your buck doing that than going for a placement in a tier 1 publication.
Because just one time's not going to get you there, right?
No. And a lot of people think that's where I want to start. You need to practice. Practice doing your interviews. Practice talking to the reporters, doing your pitch for them, showing what you have. Because you'll have a lot more give when it's not in a tier 1 publication because it's a smaller readership.
Through all your experience in production and all those years there, how much preparation was there? Let's say that on camera is 10 minutes. How much preparation would go into pre-recording?
Depends on what you're doing. If it's, a immediate hit for, a corporate CEO at any level, and this is something you've done 100 times, and you know this, you probably don't need an hour of prep. If you're doing this for the first time, we'll prep with you for days because you're nervous. We'll rehearse the whole thing like it's real. I was doing a new webinar recently. It was modified from something I'd done before, but it was a new deck for a very specific group. I practiced it full run through 4 times. That's 4 hours of prep for what was ultimately a 30-minute plus Q&A, plus a final tech run through to make sure everything worked. That was something I'd done before.
Yeah, what was the best outcome? Was it just that it made you comfortable? Because you don't want to make it feel scripted when you're on camera.
No.
But did you feel comfortable, and that's important?
I was comfortable. I knew the material because I'd done this before. So I already knew that and I was comfortable with it. It was with that particular webinar and the changes I had made to it because it was a lot more interactive for this group. And making sure that everything was there and that the interactive elements were timed so we didn't run over. And that all worked properly. That all the transitions had to work because it brought in elements from that, audience component that was newer. And those had to be worked in real time. So practicing that. So that's why even once I had the timing down right, I then did the final tech run through just to make sure all those things were there.
How do you think someone knows, just if I've done this 100 times, or, I'm pretty confident now that I could sit down, and if someone just gave me a piece of paper, I could probably look at it for 20 seconds and come on and engage in a way that feels like, oh, that was a good conversation, right? And be comfortable, not be in my head. But now I just know the more preparation, though, the higher quality that the outcome is going to be. But I could probably just walk into it and off the riff, probably be comfortable, and it'd be better than average. However, how do we know how much we should prepare? Because even though I'm really comfortable, the more I do prepare, when I'm finished up with every conversation, with every podcast, I just know we hit on the points. It was structured. It feels like we got out of it what we wanted to. How do we know how much to prepare going into this? What do we tell ourselves? What type of program or plan do we have?
There are two ways. One, prepare until you're confident. The other is have someone else external tell you you're ready. And that, if you have it, is ideal. I was working with a client, very small company. They were a startup, early stage. We were doing their launch materials. And we had to do a video. And you'll know this because you're on camera, but people who aren't on camera a lot will think, that, someone who had to read 1 minute to camera from memory, no edits, cold. That's hard to do, especially if you are someone in like finance who doesn't have media training. And he was nervous. He was, on their, business team. And he practiced this and he was in his head and he knew it. And I was there with him. And I told him, and I pulled the paper out of his hand. I said, from the top, go. And he's like, what? I'm like, just go. And he did it flawlessly. And I knew he knew it flawlessly, but he was in his head. So a lot of times you really do need that external person to give you that, this. Now you're ready.
As I sit here and I know that your material, your business. So you're at the top tier of this now. This is your thing. Was this an expected or planned journey to arrive here?
No, not even, no. I started my career as a journalist, like you mentioned. I was with the Hill newspaper. I was a multimedia producer. I was doing, video, audio, web production, interactive graphics at a newspaper. I left that to think I would go and be a freelance reporter for a few years and then land back in a newsroom full time. While I was a freelance reporter, I started doing some corporate jobs because they were paying. And they wanted someone who had a tech background like I had, but also a content background and a writing background and a production background. And looking at that, I found that there were more of those coming along. And then more. And it kind of then developed into what I have now. But there wasn't a day where I sat down and said, I will start being a fractional chief communications officer and wrote the business plan for it. I thought I would be doing something completely different. And then saw the need for this because this, communications is something that you could get, but it's going to be very expensive. And a lot of smaller companies don't have those resources yet.
Where'd the need arise out of? And because I'm sitting here thinking there's always been businesses. So did they just not feel like, because it wasn't modern age and there wasn't technology and we didn't have they just didn't have access to the platforms, somebody that they could have do it for a reasonable amount? So then did the need just arise, or it came into their view and specter that, hey, now it's possible?
A little bit of both. As we had more platforms, as we had more outlets, as we had more ways to reach people, it became harder for a founder or a small team to really manage it themselves. And before you could run billboards, you could get a company to help you do that, to do some newspaper ads, to do some radio spots, but it was very limited on what you could do because there were fewer outlets. Now you have a lot more. You could do all those things, but you also have all the online channels. And that does add complexity to it.
Yeah. So what do we do? Yeah. What do we do with the complexity? What do we do with that?
You hire someone. Don't try and do it yourself. Because like I said at the beginning, we are the expert at communicating your expertise. You do what you know. You are great at that. That's what you're building. Don't distract yourself because you'll end up doing both worse. And that's why we say we can come in at, 5 hours a month for some companies or 20 hours a week for others. We are there to grow with you because not everyone needs a 20-hour-a-week employee. That's why you have these founders and, hire one, hire two doing this function themselves because they look and it's like, I'm spending 10 hours a month on this. I don't need a full-time employee, but I also can't not do it. And that's that gap we're filling.
Do you think that in this world of a lot of things fractional, and
Yes.
it's a ton, and the benefit to fractional is you can take what you need and you can leave what you don't, and you only have to pay for the part you participate with. It seems like the whole world that we're in now. We talked about cable before, right? If you're hooked up to cable, you're paying for all the channels. It's not necessarily cheaper, but at least now it feels like we can target what we want to see. We can pick and choose what platform. And so it's as if this new environment that we're in, the rise in the new age of technology, it's as if now businesses could survive and grow and thrive that previously they wouldn't have been able to. So the opportunity seems to reach almost anyone that if you have the desire and the willingness to be an entrepreneur, to start a business, it seems like it's more viable now than ever. It might be harder, but it seems more viable because we have these things at our fingertips that maybe only Fortune 2000 companies had.
Yeah. You used to not be able to get computing power was you had to physically buy servers. You had to rent rack space. You had to manage it or pay someone to manage it. Now you just get Amazon Web Services. And it's incredibly cheap for companies to really start with that. And if you're a startup, Amazon and Google, they will give you credits if you apply to get in their programs. They will give you computing credits. They will help you because for them, once you're in their ecosystem, you're in their ecosystem. But it really does get you going. Whereas 15, 20 years ago, you couldn't do that. You could do stuff on your own because you had the laptop at home. Whereas before, you really needed a lot of infrastructure, which you couldn't afford because you weren't a business yet.
Yeah. You had to buy everything fully. To your point, you had to buy the servers, everything. That's what it says. It wasn't fractional. You buy the whole damn thing. Yeah. What excites you now here in 2026 in your area, your sector, your business? What's exciting other than making money and building a business and all that? But what's exciting?
I like the people I work with, the companies that we get to help because we get to work on fun projects. One of the things when you're working with startups, early stage companies and smaller professional services firms, smarter home services firms, anything like that, your founders are 100% in. This isn't a thing they do. This is their life. They really are fully in this. And it's fun working with those companies. I enjoy doing that much more than coming into, say, a Fortune 100 where you just have a lot of people. You now have people in these smaller entities who are really passionate about it because it's theirs.
What do you like most about it? What's that passion? How's that show up in the way that you get to engage with them?
Our goal is to help you. I was always say there is nothing you have to do because, especially on the communication side, for a lot of people, it's new. They might have had their personal Twitter or LinkedIn, but really doing it in an organized corporate way is new. And there's discomfort. So helping them become comfortable with it. And I always say this stuff doesn't exist in nature. This isn't particle physics. It's not, mathematical formulas. You could do stuff, you could not do stuff. What you're comfortable with is what we can do. And we could do some experiments and try. And if it doesn't work, we'll try something else. And then we could come back to this in 6 months because just because it didn't work in July doesn't mean it's not going to work around the holidays. So really trying those things out with them and working with them to become more comfortable over time. Because I know you and I are sitting here talking on camera, doing this interview like it's, normal. But for a lot of people, this is a very scary situation.
And working with them for you at some point, right? It probably was.
Yeah. The first time I had to do it, I'm like, okay, here's how I do it. And I train reporters to be on camera, print reporters to be on camera. And then when you have to do it yourself, it is a different thing to be on the other side of it.
Yeah. It's just, it's worrying about and thinking about all the things other than being on camera. other than
Yes.
being here that's the problem in any of these moments. What if you since you're the expert in your space in communications and you have all this experience of production and media, what advice would you give from a communication perspective to traditional colleges and universities about undergrad degrees versus what we're hearing now? You know, you have Mike Rose and all these people of the world. It seems like now we're making an argument that so much more is learned that's relevant after you would get out of a traditional degree. What communication advice would you give to an average mid-tier state university or a liberal arts school?
I don't think that's different than what we had before. You learned a lot at your first job. You learned a lot at your internship outside of the classroom. I know I did. So I think we might be focusing on it in a different way, but it was absolutely always true. You know, again, I went to journalism school. We're a reporter. We had, for different classes, we were assigned local beats we had to cover for classes. Whatever they were, the DC Metro beat. And that's what we had to cover. And
that's where you learned. That's really what the evolution of the learning was.
And we covered it like we were reporters. So it was really hands-on. And it was really about learning the practical skills. And yes, it's important to the liberal arts background, learning the thinking, the writing, the arguments, all of that, but also how to use it. And that comes outside of the classroom. That's outside of the classroom. But those work together very well. And the really practical classes were very paired. I had classes that were co-taught, one by someone who was very practical and had a deep experience in the practical side of it, and one who had the academic side of it.
More like
and
a full-time professor
classes
and an adjunct,
together,
right? It's more like an adjunct and a full-time professor together.
They were, for this particular one, I'm thinking they were both full-time. But there are other ones that were adjunct and full-time. It just sort of depends on how the departments were structured.
So that worked well for you.
It worked really well because we got both perspectives in one. And you would look at them, they would be at very tension with each other at times. And they said that was what made it work. They liked that they had that tension with each other.
So what do we do with that to educate ourselves then outside of the traditional classroom as people traditionally get into their mid-20s now in the workforce with everything changing? If that worked there, what's an approach that we should take? And maybe something as you're reflecting this conversation that you're taking, building your business, but how should we continue to learn professionally inside this conversation?
There are, classes you could take, structured, seminars that are out there from professional organizations. There are courses that people sell online. All those are options. I would say find, this is what I do. Experiment. One thing I do is I build the AI agent. I see what's out there, what works, just very hands-on. In addition to, reading. Because like with academic coursework, it's very valuable. But also afterwards, just staying informed generally about your industry and the world, but also being very hands-on with it because you need to know how it works for a lot of reasons. But also if you don't, the people you hire will be in a position where they are very aware of it and you're not. And then you can't communicate that information to clients that you need to. So you just need to know. You don't need to know everything. No one can know everything.
Yeah. So is that your most successful clients when they're engaged with the communication piece, not just relying on you to do it all, that they are really ingrained, understanding what's happening? Is that the best outcome?
Depends on the project and the size of the business in a lot of cases. Some really are comfortable with a weekly update and weekly reports. Some really want to be engaged on a daily or every other day basis. That's their comfort level. And if you're pushing them to do the other one, which they're not comfortable with, that's when it falls apart. If you notice, a trend here is where they're comfortable with.
So can that be successful, though, meeting people where they're comfortable? I mean, that's a whole different societal debate right now. Do we need to push ourselves to evolve past our limits of comfort, or do you think that it's your job to meet them where they're comfortable?
If you're not meeting them where they're comfortable, you won't have any success. You can then, once someone's comfortable, kind of nudge in directions. But you kind of have a place to start. And if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to maybe push them to do a little edgier marketing campaign. You're not going to get them to take the risk with the interview at a larger publication. They have to start where they're comfortable. Then you can go to a next step.
What's being authentic mean then? Because if you understand and know, like, hey, I really see what this business should be and what they should do. I understand how they can control the narrative, how their communications could be top tier. But in having a conversation with them, they're not comfortable going there. How do you show up still authentic, though?
You have to start somewhere. So if I know I need to get them in, to be comfortable going to, say these 5 publications and similar ones at that level, it's just repetitive. Ask them at intervals, get them to do 1 or 2, get them to go on a podcast, maybe get them to start doing occasional videos for their social channels that include them in it. Because if you rush too far, I was talking with someone yesterday, their worry was we might expand faster than we have the capacity to grow. And we don't want to do that because that'll put us in a bad situation. So they're looking at it and looking at doing it at a measured pace where they can be comfortable. Because if they can't scale that fast, and we're talking at this point physical locations, then the whole thing's going to fall apart. It's the same thing on the communication side. If you go faster, then they're actually able to scale. If you say, we want to do 5 posts a day on every network and a daily email blast, that's a lot. I mean, you know this because you do production. That's a tough cadence to keep.
Sounds easy, doesn't it? But
it sounds easy.
Yeah. It's all the
you
work
need to
and the
do
effort.
a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about to do something like that, the amount of resources that are necessary to do it at a high quality level and be valuable to the listener and the audience. That is a huge undertaking.
Which is why we kind of start wherever you're comfortable and grow with you. And we'll push you to do what you're comfortable doing. Also, if you're not comfortable doing those interviews, you're not comfortable making those videos, that's the authenticity. It'll show up and people will notice. And then you might have the opposite effect that you wanted.
Yeah.
So that's where you really do need to be comfortable and why we practice it.
In journalism school, did they touch on the part about, I don't know if you went into this communication and PR space too much, but who said it? It might have been back in the 50s and 60s, but all marketing, all exposure, all media is good media, something like that. It's a paraphrase.
There are variations on that. There's no such thing as bad press is another variation on it. Mm-hmm. There are times where that may have been true, times where it may not have been true. Now I think people are leaning into it a lot, where if something happens, you can just roll with it and use it because, like we mentioned, there's a very fast, constant news cycle. Will people remember it? And you could just use that boost to get you where you want to be. And we've seen that with people who have their 15 minutes of social media fame for whatever reason. And they end up throwing out the first pitch at a baseball game and using it to do celebrity endorsements and making quite a bit of money off of it. But they were accidental celebrities.
What do we do with the algorithm? What do we do with it?
Well, there isn't an algorithm. There are many algorithms. And what we do is we just have to really, the most important thing, be aware of it. Be aware of it personally, how it affects you and what you're consuming, but also how it shapes what you're creating for your business and how people are seeing it. And if people are seeing it, and also remember the algorithm is very influenced by pay to play. Ads show up. If you pay, you get more notice. I mean, these are businesses that are running these things. They are making money off of the ads, which are people seeing them. So I tell everyone this, like, well, our organic reach isn't what it used to be. It's like, well, that's because you've been posting more and these companies want you to start buying ads. So be aware that you will hit a ceiling if you don't pay.
I was in the room with somebody that I'm not a name dropper. I try to never be, so I won't. But I was in the room with somebody in New York City recently that is at the top of the marketing game. And the social media marketing, online marketing, SaaS, I mean, if I said their name, they'd be like, yeah. So I was in the room with them for a few hours. And they say, hey, you all, this has gone to, it's attention media now. This isn't social media, it's attention media. And what they said was, I know you're not going to believe this. There were like 10 of us in the room for a few hours. And they said, I could pick up TikTok right now, and with my millions and millions and millions of followers across platforms, I could make a TikTok, and you could make one with the same exact stuff. And I know your brain's going to say you don't believe it, but I'm telling you, you're going to get the same exposure that I'm going to get now. It's not based upon your followers anymore. And I said, hold on, there's a little bit of context, but I'm starting to see that it's at least more true than it's ever been.
It is.
It's interest media.
But it's also going, you might get that same viewership. It's potential that he's talking about. The real is when you're starting with that many followers, it's going to be a lot easier to reach those million views than if you're starting with 100 followers.
Yeah.
But of course, the potential is still there.
I think what's happened is he's seen the algorithm. He's an expert at this stuff, and he knows it's always changing. He has seen what's happening, and it is way different. But what we accept, too, it's always changing and always different. So I guess that's an argument you would make about this communication piece isn't a core part of the team that you need. And in the new fractional world, you get to pay for a fraction of it if that's all you need.
It is. And if you look at, you said the algorithm is always changing. That's why I say work with these fundamental core principles, because the algorithm's going to change, the platforms will change, but the core principles have been there for a long time and are going to stick with us. If you know those and you work with those, you'll have much more success than I mastered TikTok, because that algorithm may not be the algorithm tomorrow. We've all seen it where followers suddenly decline, viewership declines on your posts because an algorithm changed. And now you got to figure something else out.
So core principles, the core principles of your business or core principles of communication?
Both. And their business. Because that's what they're communicating. So no engagement, authenticity, talking with people. If you're doing videos, those core production principles, which kind of go back to authenticity. You want it to look real, not overproduced. Because of AI, we've become very aware of what looks very overproduced and how easy it is to do. So think about these things and use them.
What has AI, since we're talking about it, let's just not talk about it in general, but where is AI really falling and landing in your space in communications, how you're engaging every day?
We use it. We use it daily. It is a great tool, but AI is just a tool. It will do a great outline. It can do passable first drafts in some cases. It can help you do ideas. It does not produce something publishable. A human still needs to do that. And that's a big difference. It can really get you started, because I'm sure a lot of your listeners, a lot of your viewers will have this experience where the scariest thing is they're looking at a blank piece of paper and they don't know what to do. They don't have the idea. They don't know. They could put into a ChatGPT, into a Claude, my business is Acme Corp. We do this. Help me write, 5 social media posts and get ideas. And they say, these ideas are terrible, but these 5 are much better. They still came up with 5 ideas, but it was a lot easier to do when you're looking at something else. Because that blank page, we've all experienced it, can be very scary.
Yeah. It's what they call writer's block for writers.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like they could have written 3 bestsellers, and that you hear them speak about the next appearance on the 4th when they all of a sudden get imposter syndrome and writer's block. And I started with an idea, but I have no idea what to say. And we all would look at them and say, what are you talking about? You don't know what to say.
You say lots of things.
Yeah. Yeah. So is it more garbage in, garbage out? That's AI, right?
That's one element of it. If you tell it, do this thing for me, you'll get what we've called AI slop, has become the term for it. If you say, I need to do XYZ, give me these 5 bullets, help me write the outline, use it as an assistant, then it can be a lot more effective. But don't look at it to produce something that's forward-facing, that's camera-ready, because it's not going to do that.
Are you concerned about it becoming indiscernible between true human documentation or communication? Are you worried about that?
Not at the moment, maybe one day in the future, and only for certain things. I read a great analogy about it recently, was it can produce, the script for episode 1500 of Law and Order. If you put in all the previous episodes from the entire Law and Order franchise and say, write me the next episode of Law and Order, it will do that. And it will do a pretty good job. It will not write the next great American novel because it can only work off what it's trained to do.
Original and novel thought is not its thing right now.
No. And maybe one day it will be better at that. But at least right now, at least for what I'm reading and talking to people here in the foreseeable future, it will do episode 1500 of Law and Order.
Yeah.
Really well.
Has it made you better at your job?
Yes. In part from efficiency, because I put in, like I mentioned, I create agents. That's one of the ways I really kind of stay aware of what's happening technologically is I read a lot of this documentation and do it myself and get really hands-on. But these agents are not just abstract. They are things I need to do. So it helps me write newsletters. It does a lot of research. If I need for a client, I'm doing market research on cities, get me 25 global cities and I give it the list. Tell me about their populations, big industries, key demographics, all this information. It's basically running Google searches on 25 cities. I could do that. I could have staff and contractors and anyone do that. But that's something computers are really good at, is just running these Google searches. It can put it into a nice sheet for me. What it can't do, unless I be very specific, can it tell me if I want Rome, Georgia, Rome, New York, or Rome, Italy? Because if a lot of my cities are in the US, but I want a couple of European ones, I have to be very clear. The Rome I want is the one in Italy.
Give us an example of, you've built these agents. Give us an example of an agent you've built for people out here who are still really scared about this idea of what AI is.
AI, I'm going to get to the agent in a second, but if you're scared about it, an AI expert I was talking to told me what I thought was a really great definition of AI. And we hear a lot of them, but his was really simple. Input, computing, output. That's it. We've been using that for decades. It is faster. It is more powerful. It is more efficient. But input, computing, and output. I'd have agents that do a lot of the research for clients, a lot of market research. So some of these are things that run automated, tell me the news in this city every day. So just so we can stay up on trends. Some are ones where I have to put in a new input every time, but I've programmed, I know I need demographics. I need, age breakdowns. I need key industries. I need major businesses. I need to know what's in the area. If it's, a big city with a scattered metro area, if it's the metro area that matters more, a lot of things like that. Those are already programmed. I don't have to write that every time. But I just have the interface that I put in my list. I put in the nuances each time. And even though I use these things and I use them repeatedly, I check the results because they hallucinate. It does give made up things. And a lot of these are checking public records. But if it's checking, I need to know what's happened in this city this week, it's made up news stories. It's just totally written them from scratch and said it was in the, Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It was in the New York Post. Like, you could go and Google the headline. It wasn't there. It never existed. It just made something up. So that's why I say, even for things I use and I've written and I know are good, and it has a verify, give me the link. It'll just give you a generic New York Post homepage. Like it's not perfect.
What advice have you seen now in this world of entrepreneurship, right, that you didn't see happening? It was by chance. It was by luck. It was by need of the marketplace you saw. What advice are you having to take yourself? Of your advice that you give to people, what do you have to take yourself that you didn't know you would have had to?
A couple of them. One we've touched on a little bit was practice. A lot. Because no matter how good you think you are, just refresh yourself. Check with people. because you could tell the computer, is this good? Do a grammar check for me. It only knows what it has. Double check. Have someone else, another person, read it. Bounce your idea off a person, especially because we've seen a lot where these AIs are very self-reinforcing. Especially once they have more information, they can become very, yes, you're wonderful. Bounce it off a person. That's one of the reasons we're there, is we're that person for you. And if you don't have, someone in your business, a friend, your partner, whomever, don't discount people, because we need that a lot. And one I always forget to take myself, and I need to remember it the most, is you are biased when it comes to your own company. And I tell this to everyone who I work with. You are biased. This is why you hire an external person to do it, or you bring in a full-time employee, or you have a firm, you have something, because you cannot objectively do this communications for yourself. You need someone else to do it. And that is something I have to remind myself every day, is we are all biased about ourselves. And which is one of the reasons, when I was a reporter, I learned this, one, everyone needs an editor, but also before you edit something that you wrote, like you give it that first pass, go to a different room. Print it out, go to a different room, read it somewhere else, put yourself in a break. I had one person who I worked with, he would walk around the block before he went on camera because he needed that break. And he was too biased. He's like, I know my stuff, but I just need someone to tell me. And I take my break. Someone else reads my script. He walked the block and we were good. That was something very, critical to learn. And I think we all needed that reminder.
Yeah. What do you think that, in your retrospect on your career, how did originally starting in traditional journalism in the DC market, in politics, those of us that didn't grow up in it, we know it's wild, but we don't know how wild it is. Right. And so what about that experience do you think prepared you and maybe made you better here?
A lot of it was working with people, because you get reporters, who I was doing the media training with, coming from all different, they came from print, they came from TV, they came from radio. So doing a lot of media work with a lot of different people. But also one thing I just mentioned was everyone needs an editor. Don't do it yourself. From the lowest intern to the editor-in-chief, everyone needed an editor. Because like I mentioned, we're all too biased about it when it comes to ourselves. It also taught me a lot about the balance between using the technology and relying on the people. You can do both, but they work together. Because I was a digital producer in a print newsroom. And we did a lot with technology, but also a lot where we were relying on people to really check our scripts. There was no AI that we could run it through. We read it. That was our system. We would email to a copy editor who read it and made sure that it was right and that it looked good. When we were editing video, take that minute, come back to it. In terms of, content, always, the best things that I learned was have some technical skills, have some content skills. That's kind of how I ended up doing what I'm doing now, is people wanted that mix of both.
So in this world of communications now, you saw it in the past. I'm not asking this because this is like a hot button issue, but it's important because what triggered it in my mind is about, you said, hey, we're all biased. And then where I go is, I'm like, does the truth matter now? I'm not just saying from politics, but in business, does the truth matter? And your response can be, well, what is the truth? So that's a whole part of the conversation, right?
Yeah. Truth, I wish it was objective, but you talk about, college and education and classrooms. We had a great college professor who was very, very big on that. Objectivity is very hard to achieve. So is there one objective truth? Gravity, might be an objective truth. We don't float away. But a lot of other things, maybe not. There's a famous quote, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. So is there that one truth. For some things, yes. For some things, probably not. But it does matter. I tell my clients, don't lie. Don't objectively outright lie.
You must have learned that from being in DC and not taking their advice and realizing what we should do versus what's done.
Well, if you lie, you could end up with if you're doing a startup, if you're looking to do investments, some of that could really come back in a way you don't want. So don't do that, especially if you're trying to raise money. If this has happened to companies where they go out, they created thousands, tens of thousands of fake accounts to boost their numbers.
There was one recently.
That's pretty objective. The accounts didn't, exist. We were able to prove it.
There's one out there.
That's the kind of thing I'm going to say, don't lie.
Yeah, that's it. We're not going to. There was somebody who sold a company to a big bank that was in the news.
That was the one I was thinking of, and I wasn't going to.
Yep, I won't say the names or anything, but they could go research it. And because I don't know what the truth is or isn't, but the bank said, you inflated what these numbers were. We paid you a lot more based upon those numbers, and now that's not the case. So I don't know what the outcome was. I don't know if they went to jail. I don't know if there was fines, but oh my gosh. And there was the same thing where in the medical field where somebody created a system that said there's this new way to do this blood thing. Same thing. And that person who started that company is in jail now. Right?
Which is why I say don't lie, and it could really come back.
But then we have Elon, and I'm not pro or against him at all, right? He's done some big things. But these entrepreneurs, it's almost they speak what they think they're going to accomplish in the future as a truth right now. It's hard to know at times. And so the truth, so that's the question, what we try to answer today with Josh Altman. What is the truth in communications? Can it be what you want your company to be? I mean, we're not talking about statistical and data wise, but I guess the truth could be from a communication perspective, what we stand for and what we're trying to accomplish. That's a truth.
That's one truth.
Yeah.
And put that out there. This is our mission. This is who we're trying to serve. This is what we're building. Don't say you built it when I could look at your website and see that it's, a pre-release sign up. Don't put out the press release that says we've done it when I could very clearly see it's in development.
Yeah. Is maybe your value some what you keep people from doing versus also what you help them do?
A lot of it. A lot of it is because people are excited to grow. They're excited to sell. They're excited to scale. But also, they want to put out their numbers. And I was talking with someone who, does venture funding. He said, we know when you have a pitch deck that says your, total market is, $200 billion. We know that's aspirational. Give us the real number. Like,
the current addressable market is $1.5 billion. We see it over the next decade growing to $200 million, but these are the things that are going to have to happen, and we think we can be an essential part of that growth in the industry. That's what you should say.
Yeah, but if you say it's $200 billion and you are a one-person, two-person company looking for angel investment, they know. They see this all the time.
Yeah, your addressable market right now is 200 people. So, yeah.
You couldn't serve that if you wanted to because you don't have the computing power. You don't have the back end to do it. And that's what the venture guy said was, be honest with us.
Yeah. What do you think, as we wrap this up with Josh Altman here of Beltway Media, what do you think, what does the world want right now? I know that's a big statement, but what do you think it wants?
That's a big philosophical question.
Let's go. Let's finish it off with this. Take it wherever you want to take it.
I think authenticity is big. You talked about it today. We've talked about it before. It was in my newsletter recently a lot. It's been big over the last year. I think we're really wanting this because we see so much that isn't real. We see the deep fakes. We see AI generated things that even aren't trying to be real. They're just there. AI generated ads of animals. We know that's not real, but we want something tangible. People are wanting real connection. That's the authentic component. You want something where we know who you are. With businesses of all sizes, you're even seeing, Fortune 100 CEOs really stepping into much more doing personal stuff because it humanizes their company and people want to see that. At the smaller company level, It's the same thing. People are buying your company, they're buying your product, but especially when you're small and growing, they're buying you. They're buying the authentic you and the trust. And that matters. And we're going to see more of that. And if you look at this shift generationally with, Gen Z, you're really seeing this shift more. You're seeing it with older generations too. But it's really, really big as you skew a little younger. They're looking for real because, you and me, we remember, a pre-MySpace, pre-Friendster time. We remember pre-iPhone. It was very different than someone who doesn't have that memory of that time and offline. Which is why, I mentioned, go to events, go to trade shows, go to business groups in your community. That's where people are. That is where you can really be authentic. And there's no, like and subscribe. We'll talk.
Yeah. All right. So to wrap up here, what's your call to action with this managing director hat on of this media company? What's your call to action with somewhat the biased company hat on what you're doing? What's the call to action?
You are biased. You're going to need someone to help you with this. Start early. What we do is we help companies shape perception and build and maintain trust. That's that authenticity component. Do that. Do it smart. There are a couple things you don't have to do. You don't have to respond to every LinkedIn comment. You don't have to respond to every Twitter comment. Hopefully you're getting too many and you can't respond. And most importantly, and we say this all the time, communicate strategically, not voluminously. And that's what we help you do. You said, a lot of what we do is helping people not do things. We help not being voluminous. We help be strategic.
So good. All right. Joshua Altman, Director, Beltway Media, a DC communications consultancy that's starting to spread geographically. Watch out. He's smart, y'all. He knows what he's talking about. So, hey, thanks for giving us your time today. And I look forward to following you and engaging and getting this podcast out to as many people that we can help impact.
Thanks for having me.
100%.